Welcome back, everybody. You're now in the deep dive sessions. You have selected Deep Dive C, which is going to be focused on the role of virtual reality in neuroscience and in neurorehabilitation. And we call that brain power. So this brain power Deep Dive C is going to be just that, a deep dive into a set of topics that really 2 hours is hardly enough to even scratch the surface. And we found over the years of running the virtual medicine conference that these deep dive panels are really an opportunity to get, into the weeds on really complex topics. And we found that no matter how much time we schedule for these, it's never enough. In the past, we've done an hour. We were just barely getting started after an hour, then an hour and 15 minutes. And this year we said, let's just go for a full 2 hours and really get deeply into the weeds and invite some of the best people in the world to talk about this. So we're so excited for this panel discussion with really 3 outstanding panelists who will be moderated by an outstanding moderator, and that's Itai Danovich. Dr. Danovich is our chairman of psychiatry here at Cedars-Sinai. He has already spoken on the main stage earlier in the conference, and today he is going to be moderating us through a set of conversations about the role of using virtual reality to explore the brain, to diagnose conditions, and to help with managing brain conditions, to help with neurorehabilitation. And so he is going to introduce our 3 outstanding panelists. Can't wait to hear this discussion. Be sure, as you're listening along, to stay active on the live chat if you'd like. This is a great opportunity to engage with one another. We will be moderating that session as well, so be sure to check it out and enjoy the presentation. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Danovich. Thank you all for being with us today.
All right, thank you. It's a pleasure to introduce you and to moderate this panel on virtual reality and neurorehab, or really more broadly, how VR might be used to improve brain function, improve brain recovery, improve our health. We have an outstanding panel with 3 individuals who bring a really distinct set of interests and expertise to the question at hand. I'm going to moderate the discussion, and a couple caveats. The first is that I'm going to be using the term VR myself, but really to encompass immersive therapeutics at large. And I'll leave it to our guest panelists to be more specific as need be. And I want to begin by briefly introducing each of our panelists and then turning the screen over to them to allow them to give you a brief introduction to themselves, to their work, to their interests. And then after those introductions, we'll go ahead and open things up for more of a free-form discussion around compelling questions in this space, hopefully doing a deep dive. So let me begin by introducing our first panelist, Dr. Walter Greenleaf. Dr. Greenleaf is a neuroscientist and medical technology developer at Stanford University. He is the co-founder and board chair for the International Virtual Reality Health Association and is a scientific advisor and grant reviewer for the U.S. Public Health Service, the National Science Foundation, the National Institute of Health, Canada Foundation for Innovation, NASA, and the U.S. Department of Education. Dr. Greenleaf has served as the principal investigator for research projects funded by many different entities. He's a leading authority in the field of digital medicine and medical virtual reality. His current research focus is really on developing computer-supported clinical products with a specific emphasis on applying VR and digital health technology to address difficult problems in behavioral health and in physical medicine, such as post-traumatic stress, anxiety disorders, depression, traumatic brain injury, stroke, substance use disorders, and autism spectrum disorders. Walter, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Let me. I was worried you were going to keep going. I should have given you a truncated bio. It's always too much. I'm sorry. So sorry to interrupt you now.
No, I was just about to. First of all, you really have been at the forefront of this field. You certainly, I think, on the day that I first was introduced to a VR headset, you were there at the other side of the table. And so I've only read a part of your really extensive bio, but let me turn things over.
Thank goodness you didn't read the whole thing.
Current work and interest.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here with this group.
Great. Do you want to, before we move on to our next panelist, do you want to take a moment to present your current work and interests?
Let's meet our fellow panelists first before we do that.
Okay. All right. So next, I'll introduce Veena Somireddy. Veena Somireddy is a virtual and augmented reality software developer and has a focus on creating games and experiences for medical training and simulation. She has a BS in computer science and a master's in game design and development from the University of Texas at Dallas. Veena currently leads the creation of therapy tools at NeuroRehab VR full-time while also pursuing her PhD. Her research concentrates on applications of virtual reality in the medical domain. So welcome, Veena.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Nanthia Suthana. Dr. Suthana is the Ruth and Raymond Stoddard Chair in Neurosurgery at UCLA. She's assistant professor of psychiatry, neurosurgery, and bioengineering as well, all at UCLA, and serves as associate director of the Neuromodulation Division at the Semel Institute for Neurosciences at UCLA. Dr. Suthana uses virtual and augmented reality combined with wearable technologies in patients with brain implants to understand cognitive function and to develop novel therapies for neurologic and psychiatric disorders. She has been awarded an NIH Brain Initiative grant to study deep brain mechanisms of real-world spatial navigation and is the recipient of a McKnight Technological Innovations Award in Neuroscience. So welcome, Suthana. Okay. Oh, you're muted, Suthana.
I said, thanks, everyone. Happy to be here.
All right, great to have the three of you. And what we'll now do is we'll take turns, beginning with Walter, then going to Veena and Nanthia, giving you an opportunity to briefly describe yourself, what it is that you do, what interests you most right now, and we'll use that as the jumping off ground for our subsequent discussion. So Walter, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, I'm excited to be here because I think this is a real transitional point for our field. There's been a large amount of work to give us the background that we need to have, both as a scientific foundation and also clinical data. And things are starting to move forward quite rapidly. I'm going to share my screen for a moment or two just to give you a little bit more of a background on my perspective and what I'm excited about. And let's see. Okay. And as Itai mentioned, I'm affiliated with Stanford's Virtual Human Interaction Lab and Stanford's Medical Center. What I find myself focused on right now is the integration of VR, AR, XR technologies, mixed reality technologies. There's medical extended reality. There's a bunch of terms floating around, but immersive technologies and their applications to clinical care and also health and wellness. And I'm getting particularly excited about the affordances that are being brought to us by integrating wearable sensors, psychophysiological measurements, and biosensors in general, harvesting data about ourselves and our behavior, putting it into the cloud, and then using some very sophisticated machine learning and data aggregation systems to help us understand the value and come up with more precision approaches in healthcare. So it's a wonderful time to see the confluence, not just of AR and VR technology, but the supportive technologies that surround it and allow us to do some amazing things. I have the honor of working with a number of academic groups, both at Stanford and at the University of Colorado. But most of my work right now is functioning as a translational neuroscientist to take the findings that the groups are doing, the amazing work that academicians have been doing for decades in this field, and helping it move out into the clinical and commercial arena. And to that extent, I've had the opportunity and an honor to work with a number of exciting companies, and both in the healthcare arena and also in the technology arena. I'm looking forward to how what we're doing right now is going to impact the future. I think the data we're collecting right now, the analytics we're doing, especially when it comes to cognition, attention, and adapting for disabilities is going to be part of the next generation that our children and generations after that will have as part of their lives. We're going to be harvesting the information that we're using right now to do better clinical care. It will become part of how we interact with the built environment, how we interact with technology, how we interact with each other. We will leverage sensors and analytics to help our technology understand us, our cognitive state, our mood state, and our intentions to better do their job of connecting us and empowering us. So many of the things that we're working on right now to understand cognitively and emotionally and physically what we're doing are going to empower that next generation of technology. So it's important that we get it right, that we not build biases into the system, and design for diversity, design for age-appropriate situations. So just to wrap up my introduction, I'll mention it's so exciting for me because I have been working in the field for a long time. I started back in 1987 when the computers were very expensive and the technology, the head-mounted displays were so uncomfortable. And I had more hair back in those days, and not just because I've been wearing a lot of HMDs over the years, but just I see a tie. I see you're a little worried right there.
That's right.
Yeah. And but there's been a large number of people who've worked very hard over the last 20 or 30 years to bring us to the point where we are now, paving the way to understand how VR and AR technology can be used clinically. And this is something that's often overlooked, but I checked not too long ago, and when I looked in 2016, we had more than 2,000 peer-reviewed publications about how to apply VR to clinical problems. So there is a underpinning of scientific research that has brought us to where we are now. Now, of course, we have to extend that research with larger sample sizes. The technology was so expensive previously, we couldn't do many large studies. And also with today's technology, make sure we're current. But the pathways have been established. And I took a look back at one of the publications I did back in 1994 and another one a few years later in 2001 to see what had changed. Was there a progression? And in that stage, not much changed. Moved very, very slowly. But if you look where we are now, it's just incredible. So, we now have better ways of capturing movement, better ways of interpreting the information. So we're really poised to move forward at great speed. So I'm so excited to hear from my fellow panelists and be with you today. And
Thank you, Walter.
Here we go.
That really is an incredible timeline. It's unbelievable what's happened over that span. That would be its own terrific panel, which is just going through this brief history, of immersive therapeutics. Veena, let me next turn things over to you to talk a little bit about your work and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I really love the introduction from Dr. Greenleaf. It's amazing that you've been there for so long, since the 90s, working on VR. And I used to read your papers while in school and going through them. And I've seen that progression since 2012 is when I started working in VR. And it's progressed so much in just 6 to 7 years. But imagine how much it has since the times that you are working on it. So it's incredible to see that progression. And I like that you're keeping track of it and you're well known in the industry and you work with everybody. So you have the best knowledge of what's happening in the VR industry. So I'm happy to be on a panel with you and Dr. Sana too. I'm going to share my screen quickly. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. So I'm Veena. I'm the CEO of Neuro Rehab VR, and I come from a technical background. Started to have my computer science, and then also game design development. So I just started working on virtual reality, building virtual reality applications for medical simulation and training, and then had a chance to work with my current co-founder and investor who has a neurological recovery clinic, and started building applications for the patients in the clinic because we saw so much research out there. We knew that we could actually put this into application for the patients at the clinic. And that's how it pretty much our company started. And I built the first few apps, and now we have a much bigger team working on it and commercializing. So We concentrate mostly in creating virtual reality applications for physical therapy and occupational therapy. Each year, millions of Americans need physical therapy after suffering a neurological incident or a musculoskeletal injury. And here is Joe is one of our patients. His stroke actually left him paralyzed on one side and he couldn't really move his fingers. But there was a point when he scratched his head at a certain spot, the fingers on his left hand actually opened up. That showed that there is a connection between the motor cortex in his brain to his limbs. He just needed to really tap into that. And for that, you need really good physical therapy and also cognitive therapy. And what we do with everything that we build it on the concept of neuroplasticity, which I'm sure if you're in the neuro field, you would have heard about it. That is, your brain does have the ability to recover from a stroke or a neurological incident. That is, the healthy parts of your brain can take over the functionality of the damaged areas, but again, requires extensive physical therapy and cognitive training. And we want to help in that process. Moreover, right now, there are only about 74 physical therapists per 100,000 Americans, but the number of people who are turning 65 and older every day is growing faster than the US population. So there is a real need for efficient physical therapy that gives you better outcomes with the least amount of work and also getting it to the next century. And here's a quick video of what we have built. We create all of these applications leveraging the concepts of neuroplasticity. We provide evidence-based, fun, engaging, and motivating therapy exercises. And since our company is located inside a neuroclinic, we've had the luxury of having access to physical therapists and patients every day, and that they can provide us with constant feedback. So we're able to build applications that are really useful to them, and it comes from their need. So right now we have a device that is a FDA registered medical device, and we've seen that the gamified therapy is highly engaging for the patients, and now it also providing a new therapy modality for our therapists too. So they have a new tool that they can use to make their life more efficient and better and provide a good experience for the patients too. And as Dr. Walter Greenleaf said, there is a vast body of research that shows VR is effective for therapy. And then with our system, you can also make sure the therapy sessions are being recorded and can be used for reimbursement. So we're thinking about the experience as well as the insurance and the reimbursement and making sure our systems are HIPAA compliant so that patients can track their progress securely. That's about a good overview from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veena.
Veena, you were a little bit modest, I think. Didn't you just get accepted into an amazing program with AWS?
We did, yeah. We were one of the 10 startups that got into the Amazon Healthcare Accelerator.
Congratulations.
Out of, I think, 470 applications, I think. Thank you.
Awesome. Would love to hear more about what that means for you and for your work. Let's plan to come back to that. But before we do, want to complete our introductions with Nantia. So Nantia, please take over and tell us a little bit about your work.
Let's share screen. So a slightly different topic, but also using, can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. But using VR to develop new treatments and also as a research tool. My lab uses it to try to understand cognitive function, primarily focused on learning and memory, spatial navigation. So at UCLA, we have a motion capture lab that integrates with VR and AR technologies and records brain activity during these immersive experiences in patients who have deep brain electrodes implanted. So here is one such patient who has been willing to be videoed. And what we do is we put on motion capture suits that are able to be tracked with ceiling wall-mounted cameras that you can see in the corner of the videos. They're able to put on a scalp EEG headset. This is back in the old days when we used to use the gear. Nowadays, we've upgraded these headsets almost every year. And you can see a brain image of this one of these patients showing electrodes that are implanted in deep brain regions here in the hippocampus, which we know is important for forming memories. It's also an area that is affected in Alzheimer's disease. And so we can use VR and AR to simulate real world experiences and test out new therapies to see if they will actually translate into the real world. Here's another example of a patient walking around during one of these experiments, and we're recording brain activity in real time. You can see down below. We can record eye movements, eye position, gaze tracking in the VR headsets or in AR or just in the real world, as you see here, and start to ask questions about relationships between brain activity and different events in their experiences. They're maneuvering through this space, learning locations. Here's another task that's specifically testing memory. So spatial memory, they have to learn a series of locations that are outlined with these halo cylindrical objects, and they have to later retrieve from memory where those locations were placed. And all during this process, we're recording from brain activity, we're recording eye movements, eye position, and trying to understand that relationship. From all of these studies, here's a summary of some of the things that we've discovered. We've found signals in these deep brain regions that are involved in memory to be modulated by walking speed, proximity to environmental boundaries, to retrieved memories, for example, remembering where one of those halo positions are located, which you see in these circles that are presented on the top-down view of the environment. Also to be modulated, these signals seem to be modulated by the presence of others, and so the movement or position of another person in a shared environment. Eye movements seem to also modulate these signals, and walking direction. And our goal right now is just to understand how all of these relate and under what circumstances one may be more influential over these brain activity patterns. Ultimately, we are also interested in how therapies change these signals, and for instance, stimulation to the brain, or in the case of VR types of therapeutics, how that changes these brain signals, and whether it could be used to treat patients who have Alzheimer's disease, epilepsy, or other disorders that affect memory, and also a trial right now that we have for post-traumatic stress disorder. So we also are working on other areas such as anxiety, PTSD, and also behaviors such as abnormal, loss of controlled eating, and we use VR to simulate real-world experiences in these cases. Try to understand brain activity, and then ultimately combine it with therapies to see if there are improvements in underlying abnormal brain patterns. So we have several clinical trials ongoing, and this is the team that does it. These are all the lab members, but there are lots of other collaborators and clinicians that we work with, as well as, of course, the funding that makes it possible. So just a quick summary. I didn't want to go too much into the weeds, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to expand further.
Terrific. Thank you. I think that we're definitely going to want some of those weeds. Really a remarkable spectrum of work, that spans what each of the three of you talked about, both with VR as a tool for understanding how the brain works. VR as a tool for clinical assessments, understanding function, debilitation, facilitating diagnosis. And then VR as a tool to facilitate therapeutics, delivery of interventions to ameliorate function or to facilitate, health and recovery. I wonder if we could start with with the first part of that, with what VR can teach us about how the brain works and functions, and whether we might start by asking the question of answering the question really of what does VR do that we can't do without VR? I mean, why is VR so special? What does it help us to understand that is hard to do without, immersive therapeutics about brain function? Nante, do you want to start with that?
I was going to say, I have all the thoughts on this one, of course. So when I first started grad school many years ago, 15, 16, no, more like almost, no, yeah, that was right, 17 years ago, something like that. I was very interested in understanding memory and spatial navigation, which in humans, traditionally in neuroscience studies, you can't do in a way such that you're recording brain activity while a person's maneuvering through space. It's just not possible. These machines that we have to record brain activity require a person to be completely immobile and lying in an MRI scanner, for instance, or even if they are able to maneuver somewhat, there are motion artifacts that contaminate the signals. And so it's a major challenge, but I wanted to do it anyway. And so I remember using, basically view-based VR, which, basically video game-like presentations. And the nice thing about even just that is that we can start to move a little bit closer to the real world while still maintaining control as the researcher, meaning when I want to present a stimulus or how long I want it to be, or repeating it X number of times in a certain time of window. I mean, that's really what VR is so powerful for a researcher to be able to do, is have some sort of control while also asking the question, what's happening during naturalistic behaviors that happen in the real world? Now, in 2015 or 16, when I tried on my first VR headset, you know, I realized, okay, this is a far advance compared to what we've been doing, which are these 2D screens and an MRI machine. Because there's a level of immersiveness and cues, you know, self-motion cues that you can't recreate in an immobile setup. You know, people have been doing this in neuroscience in freely moving animals for decades, and a lot of the Nobel Prize winning findings are there. But how do we connect that to the human brain? And that's been the ultimate challenge. So I think, you know, to sum up, one of the major advantages here of immersive, you know, VR like HMD usage is that you can simulate the real world, but with control, you know, so you can have, you know, basically the user can have control over what the person is seeing, and it better reflects what's really going on in that naturalistic setting. And that's ultimately what we want to be able to understand about the human brain, you know, what's happening during naturalistic behavior. Otherwise, the treatments we're developing in the lab in these very unnatural circumstances may not translate to real life when a person's at home and, you know, walking around their house and forgetting, you know, how to maneuver in their familiar environment, as is the case with Alzheimer's disease. So that's just, you know, one piece to the powerful advantages that VR can provide.
It's a wonderful overview. And another piece I'm excited about is that in many ways we can take what has been subjective and make it more objective to measure. We can challenge an individual and see how they react to, as you described it, a controlled situation. And instead of asking someone, how did you feel, or how did you feel last week, or how did this affect you, or trying to interpret a dynamic without all the information we need, we now can evoke a response, and we can measure psychophysiologically and behaviorally objective measurements related to that response. And that allows us, especially as we start moving into more the cognitive and emotional and behavioral aspects of human behavior, so much that we otherwise had to rely on very, very noisy and sometimes biased self-report data. And I also think that one of the powers of virtual environments are the ability to promote adherence and through by being engaging and being relevant to an individual. I think if in the laboratory setting, it's one thing, but if we want to change someone's behavior and how they react to something, if we want to teach them skills, we sometimes need to find a way to have something that can be done away from the hospital, away from the research clinic, that is affordable and portable for daily use. And I think the VR environments allow us to go beyond the lab and get more out into the field.
I love those 2 points, and I would like to add to that something that Nanthia, am I saying that right?
Yeah,
Nanthia said is being able to recreate the real world, which is amazing because, you know, the patients that we work with, they're trying to get back to their daily living, trying to be able to do normal things like grocery shopping, cooking. And what we can do is recreate those real world scenarios in the virtual world so that they can train in a safe place and also have the visual feedback, tactile feedback with the controllers and vibration, and also sound feedback. So they're truly feel immersed in the environment, and they can learn the gross motor skills that they need to learn to be able to go back and do those normal daily living activities. So transfer of skills from the virtual world to the real world is something that we really work on and is important. And you can do that with VR, and you really can't, other than creating a whole grocery store in your therapy setting. And the other thing is what we can add is data, just like Dr. Greenleaf said, the data that we are collecting is progress data from how the patient is doing from one session to the next one to show them objective data. So this is your progress and this is your increase in range of motion or movement, because physical therapy can be very subjective. The therapists are always nice. They can tell you you did a great job, but you did a great job doesn't really tell you more than, you did okay today, but doesn't give you that objective data. So that's something that we can do in having virtual reality and having the sensors and track that data that we want. And one more thing that I would add to that is, I love the question as to what can you do in VR that you can't do otherwise. And we think about that every day, because if we're building something, we want to make it more efficient, better than what the traditional therapies are. And that's something like we can make the therapists more efficient than they were previously. With having this device, they're able to do things that they were not able to do otherwise. And so my 2 cents on that subject.
Can you give any particular examples of that?
Yeah, sure, I can. So one of the things that our patients work on is gait training. Is important. That is learning how to walk again. So they can prime the person into do some stretches, do gait training, and using a robotic system maybe. Once they're done with the gait training, they're working on ambulation, working on distance goals. So you can use virtual reality in all 3 scenarios because of how the systems are now. They're fully portable and movable. So you can use the system with somebody on a treadmill and they're working on the gait training. You can have a virtual reality scenario where they're, moving through a virtual environment, working on the distance goals. And they can come out of the virtual from the treadmill and then have another scenario. Now they're working on their movement from side to side, maybe lateral shifts. This is something our stroke patients work on, because depending on which part of side was affected, a lot of people put their weight on the non-affected side, and working on balancing that weight is something that the therapists have to do. So they can move from one modality to another really quickly, but using virtual reality with the same exact device, instead of having a treadmill and then maybe a whole nother device for something else. You can just all do that in one place, which is one device, and a totally different environment. You can, because it's software, as software developers, we can build anything, and that's the power that virtual reality gives you.
Bill, and you can make it fun and engaging and
Yes.
rewarding, and that for something that can be as challenging and sometimes scary and sometimes boring as rehabilitation, to make it engaging is so important.
And that comes back to adherence too, as Dr. Walt Greenleaf said. Adherence is really, really important in physical therapy and rehab. And if they can see their scores, they can see their metrics, they're motivated to come back and beat those scores, and that has helped us a lot.
Do you see variation in terms of how responsive patients are to the VR environment, and what's kind of the descriptive range that you see from people that take to it really quickly and people that have a really tough time with it? I wonder if you guys could each describe what some of your experiences are, both where it works well and where there are challenges.
Well, at one point I was doing some work with the Stanford Center on Longevity, and we were looking at our senior population. And there was a concern initially when VR headsets were crossing over to the consumer arena that it would be a difficult thing for our seniors to use. And we know now that that's not necessarily the case, that compared to texting on a cell phone or mousing on a computer, putting on a headset and having an experience is much more intuitive and easy to use, and of course can connect people who otherwise might be isolated. There's so much opportunity there. But in terms of that population having a challenge, the concerns did not come up. What I have seen though, and I'm sure it's a problem that we all need to keep in mind and address, is that sometimes the headsets don't always fit people with different head sizes, and you need to adjust the distance between the eyes and the setting. And for youngsters, for young people, that's often not easily done or possible to do. So there are some limits to the technology that's in the consumer space right now that I think does create a challenge for that.
Yeah, I can add to that with my experience. We have worked with pediatric patients as well as elderly and geriatric patients. Pediatric patients obviously love it. They're digital natives. already and they love VR. They've learned about it. So it's been easy for like 13 and above. When the headset does fit on them properly, they understand it. They learn it really quickly and they come back and ask the therapist that they want to use VR today, which is great for the therapist too, because that kid is motivated. Usually they do not want to do physical therapy, but then now they're motivated and they know exactly what they want to do. So that's been great. We've also worked with, I think that our oldest patient was 92 years old. We were very apprehensive about putting VR on him, and he was a patient who was also a little bit cognitively impaired, but he could understand our instructions. So we added, put the VR headset on him, and there were three of us standing around him and trying to tell him what to do, and he just ignored all of us. He put on the headset, and he knew exactly what to do. He was picking up items from a shelf and putting in a cart, and that's the part where the intuitiveness comes in. With a phone, you have to press buttons, which is not normal, but everybody knows how to pick up something from a shelf and put it into a cart. And because of that intuitiveness, it was just easy. We didn't really have to tell them what to do. So learning from that experience, we've moved to like creating like very easy tutorials where we just show what to do versus tell people what to do. It's just much easier. And we've seen that, especially with elderly patients, it's a myth if they catch on to it much faster than we thought they would. Just making sure that we'll obviously make sure that working on contraindications, like if they have epilepsy, have a lot of motion sickness, we do not put the headsets on them, but we kind of start off with like a easier experience and a calming experience before we get something to go to something that's more functional.
Great. Nadia, were you going to say something?
I'm not sure if I have too much to add, but in our experience, I think once you get over that initial sort of hump, which is either related to a hesitation that some elderly, populations may have. The pediatric patients work with are always super excited to try on these headsets. But in other populations, we work a lot with epilepsy patients, PTSD patients, there may be some hesitation just due to, previous rumors about motion sickness or other things. I found that once we get over that and they see, especially with the ambulatory VR settings that we use, those are much more intuitive than, like the joystick driven VR, which even can cause more motion sickness. So I found that those ones are much more intuitive and can work even better than some of these, view-based or sitting down type of VR experiments. But it's a constant challenge in sort of the neuropsychology field, independent of VR, in terms of how to instruct a participant to do a task. Like that's something the field has been dealing with forever. I don't think it's any worse or necessarily that much different with VR, but I will agree that the intuitiveness is there, and so they just have to walk forward. I mean, they don't have to do anything else, so it's a little bit easier in that sense.
Each of you described the front end of the introduction, to virtual reality and being overall much more intuitive for people, including people for whom you might think there would be barriers. I wonder also about ongoing engagement, with virtual reality after the 8th or the 10th session, or the 20th session. What happens over time as the novelty, has worn off, the excitement, of being introduced to the technology has diminished? What is the engagement with it like over time, and what are some of the factors that keep people really meaningfully engaged, or deter that?
We might have to look beyond the acute and post-acute rehab zone or the lab research zone for the answers to that question, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Veena and Nanthia, you only see people for a discrete amount of time, and there haven't been the opportunity to see people over several years with using VR. Where we do see it being used over time is more I'd say in the health and wellness arena, where people are using VR to help relax, to manage an anxiety disorder, or to and of course, there's people who are using it functionally as part of design or work processes. But I don't think that's the heart of your question. I think your question is does the novelty that promotes adherence right now? Does it persist over time? And what we find in our research at the Stanford Virtual Human Interaction Lab is that some of the effects that people learn and change their behavior and their attitudes by a VR experience, those do persist. To the question of, do people continue to use a VR system as once they get over it? I think yes. There's a really interesting program called Supernatural, which is basically an exercise program that motivates people with a coach to move and to exercise. And what I understand from its success is that people use it. Those who get over the initial hump of exercise stick with it for a long time. So I think in general, the novelty isn't just when you first do it. It's also, it can be engaging afterwards too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Venus, over the more discrete but still intensive periods of time that you might use it, what do you see about the duration per episode and also over multiple episodes of care?
Yeah, I mean, this is a question that again, another big question that we've always been thinking about, and making sure we're building something that has adherence and people want to keep coming back to it. It's very important for that, so that there's that continuum of care, and then they're seeing that progress. So when we started to build these applications, we worked with a whole range of patients from like stroke to Parkinson's to MS. And if you've heard the term, if you see one brain injury, you've only seen one brain injury because the diagnosis is so different for each of them. And so when we were building our system, we had to make sure that all of these patients are able to use it and not one of them gets bored with it. So we have low functioning patients, and we have higher functioning patients, maybe spinal cord injury patients who are athletes, are much more higher functioning, and we give them something easy to do. They'll try it once and they don't want to come back to it. So this is something that we had to think about and add in as part of our system. So one of the things that we have done is our applications are very customizable, so that the therapist can customize it to the level of the function of the patient, and then work with that patient. And when they see that it's starting to get easier for them, they start to lose motivation, you can increase that level of difficulty, just like it is normal gaming. Increase that difficulty level, so now they're motivated to get back and beat that next level. So I can give you a quick examples. We had a TBI patient with a gunshot wound come to us, and he was working on one of our applications, is picking up items, putting in a cart. We didn't have previously it was free flow. We didn't have a timer on it, and we had about 3 levels. And the first time he used it, he liked it, and he kept coming back. But we added a 2-minute timer where he had to finish the level in 2 minutes. It was really frustrating for him, and but also he took it as a challenge, and he was like, I want to beat this. So sometimes we used to see him getting a little bit angry while doing the session, but he was so motivated. We could see tremendous improvements in his range of motion while doing the app. So at that time, we had 3 levels. He finished the first one. In the next 3 sessions, in about a month, he got through all 3 levels. So we had to go back and actually build more levels because of him. So we saw that happen in real time, and we kind of fixed it. And that's the good thing about having building software. You can keep adding on to it, and you can iterate it so that we're getting to that optimal point, and we can make sure that we are keeping people engaged so that they'll keep coming back to the app. And I'm a big fan of Beat Saber and Supernatural. They keep coming out at different levels, and Beat Saber had easy, hard, medium, then they had expert, beat all of it. Now there's expert plus, which I'm actually trying to beat right now. So,
let me just one placeholder, because I want to follow up on that. But and at the same time, when I led with a question about what VR can teach us about how the brain works before assessment, before therapeutics. And Nanthi, I wanted to ask you to address that. But before we do, still in the space of the applied space of therapeutics, of rehabilitation, what would it take for VR to become a standard of care in neurorehabilitation? For it to become part of the armamentarium that you would expect to see in every single neuro rehab program? and so what would it take, and how far along is it, on that pathway?
I could talk a little bit about that. Or did you want to go first, Doctor?
I, why don't we both do it, because I think there's two different answers to it, depending on the point of view.
Okay. For me, I think one, ease of use. I think we've touched upon it a little bit. We're making sure that it's not intimidating for somebody who sees the system, and physical therapists also liking it. So it's both. It's the physical therapists and the clinicians using the system and kind of changing their ways of doing traditional therapy. That's one part of it, and then the other part is like making sure that they keep coming back to the system. Ease of use. I'm forgetting the point that I wanted to talk about. You can go, Dr. Greenleaf, and I'll come back to it.
Often what is the constraint of bringing out innovations that we know can make a big difference in somebody's course of therapy is the speed bumps and the barriers that are in the clinical environment and the medical legal environment. The clinics are optimized, meaning they don't have a lot of extra time. They don't have a lot of extra financial resources. And bringing in something new has to save time or conserve resources in addition to providing better therapy. And that's often what is the challenge for an early stage company to demonstrate that it's going to, not only is it going to help improve the outcomes, which is a research task in itself, but also that it's going to not you're not going to have to hire an extra person just to maintain the equipment. You're not going to have to, and how does it fit into the reimbursement, regulatory or barriers? So I think those are often more challenging than coming up with more exciting content or a better protocol. I think in the long run, what's going to really make a big difference is optimization of therapeutic protocols. I think heretofore, we haven't been able to easily measure and compare different styles of approach or personalize it for this particular type of person with these particular goals, with this particular injury, gender, and other health conditions. It's a multidimensional thing. What's the most optimal therapeutic pathway, and how do you dynamically change it at different points? We now have the tools to do that. So I think that's going to help us demonstrate the economic utility as well as the healthcare utility of these new systems.
Yeah, thank you for
In other
that.
words, demonstrating that a well-defined therapeutic protocol is effective at achieving a specified endpoint.
Yeah, and compared to the traditional ways of doing things, it's more efficient. There is ROI to this. You're not losing money by adding the system. You could actually help with your bottom line and probably make more money. And the part about where you don't need an extra therapist, you just need the same staff that you're working with are good enough to learn and then make them more efficient. And the other part is education. So virtual reality is novel. Virtual reality in physical therapy is novel. So we just can't provide a system to a clinician and like tell them to use it. We also have to provide the education on how to do it, what are the creative ways of using something, and what are these protocols that Dr. Kim was talking about, that standard of care, and create that. And education is a big part of making sure that there is adherence and people come back to it and use it every day.
Yeah, and I'd imagine that it's probably pretty powerful for homework. Certainly there's a limit to what happens at the clinic and needs to happen in between sessions.
That's true.
And one of the amazing things of being able to collect data from home rehabilitation is often patients will plateau, or they'll be doing something incorrectly, and then you don't find out until they come back into the clinic. And often too much time has passed. But if we have a system that VR allows us to have to both motivate, engage, and manage a patient dynamically and see what's going on from home, it makes all the difference in terms of optimizing protocols.
Great. So Nandya, in your presentation about your work, some of the themes were around discovery of how the brain processes spatial information. Can you speak a little bit more about what questions VR is allowing you in your lab to answer about how the brain functions?
Sure. Let's see. So where to start? One thing we're playing around with now currently is the advantage of VR to shift quickly between contextual environments and how that shift may affect these spatial representations that are in the brain. And so, just simple things like changing, not necessarily changing it dramatically, subtle changes of cues on the wall, or, just where you easily can transport someone to another environment and see how that affects these signals. Of course, also, how movement within these environments is affecting the signals. As I mentioned, we see speed, position relative to certain cues, relative to target areas that they had to encode previously in memory. So, those are also some other things that we look at, what they're looking at, how, their gaze position on certain objects or items. What else? Walking direction. There's a couple very seminal findings in the neuroscience field that have won Nobel Prizes, the finding of these place cells and grid cells in the brain that respond to when an animal is in a particular location and environment. And grid cells specifically, they fire in this very beautiful hexagonal geometric pattern as a person maneuvers through space. Not a person, sorry, an animal. And so one of the things we're looking at is whether that's similar in humans, because it carries a lot of importance for how we understand the system and how it potentially is affected in things like Alzheimer's disease. If we can understand that mechanism, then maybe we can start to find ways to ameliorate the dysfunction that occurs in these patients who have severe memory problems. So those are a couple things, yeah.
Right. Are there other questions like that VR is being used in order to help elucidate?
Like other as in outside of the domain of spatial?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot actually. One area that we've started to go into and have been recently funded is to simulate, anxiety and provoke fearful states in as it's relevant for patients with PTSD. So we have a clinical trial right now with patients who have severe PTSD in which no other treatments have worked. And we are looking at basically in a safe environment, simulating certain states in these individuals and seeing how these brain activity patterns are altered or triggered or evoked, by these trauma reminders, and see whether, a therapy, for instance, stimulation of those signals can improve their outcomes. So, but that's one example. We have collaborators who are looking at, in patients who have obesity, who have loss of controlled eating, and what certain brain signals look like when they are, eating, for example, very unhealthy foods versus healthy foods. And you can do this in real life, obviously, while they're eating with eye tracking, but you can't get this very controlled, repetitive stimulation of food objects like you can in VR. And so we have a VR experiment to basically do that and see how these brain signals react. What else? Sleep. We have, well, that's not really VR related, but we do VR and AR before and after sleep to see how brain signals during sleep are modified and perhaps could improve memory before and after sleep. And a number of other things. There's so many things, you could do with VR for neuroscience studies.
There's something that we have noticed in the clinical setting that I would love Nathia to let us understand why that's happening. So what we have seen happen is people do forget the bias of their diagnosis. And we've seen people do more once they have a VR headset on, or they're more stabilized, they're lifting their hand up much further than they've ever done before. And their clinicians and their caretakers tell us, this is the first time they've seen this person bend over so much in their wheelchair or actually lift their hand up. And people seem to forget the reference points as to what they cannot do and then end up doing more, maybe because they don't have that reference point. So this is my ability, and they forget that, they don't see that mental barrier. Or it could be something that VR is unlocking, where there's decreased anxiety and decreased pain, and that's helping them do more. So I would love to know what's happening in the brain when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Another one I also didn't mention is Parkinson's disease, and freezing is another topic that collaborators of mine are looking into in terms of how to manipulate, hopefully improve their freezing with AR, VR, and measure the brain signals that relate to that amelioration, such that they can replicate it, without necessarily always having to have VR, AR on, but replicating it within the brain using a device or something.
We've worked with early onset Parkinson's patients, and we have seen they have intentional tremors. So when they have an intention of picking up something, but as they, even just within a 5-minute span of using virtual reality, we have seen that tremors go down. And there is a little bit of retention after you take your headset off. But that's a question, Natia, it'd be awesome if you could answer. And there is something happening in the brain there that we could explore.
I also think what we're talking about now is one of the factors that could really help with making this mainstream, making VR mainstream. If we can, do these studies, these well-controlled brain imaging studies during VR, AR, all of these things, it'll sort of provide the data we need to say, okay, this is really changing something, that is beneficial, and convince, the medical community that it's worthwhile to pursue.
And enhancing that neuroplastic change as
showing
faster and quicker.
Mechanism of action, right? This is the term that we all talk about.
Exactly.
And in the space of neuro rehab, do you see as much of a role for VR for assessments, neuropsychological assessments, as there is for therapeutics and rehabilitative function? If so, what is some of the role of VR in neuropsychological assessments?
Well, I think we can make them a little bit more ecologically correct than what are some of the standard tests. And I think also, again, I think we can combine them with objective measurements of that are concurrent with that to somehow move some of these more subjective assessments. And then, as Natia was mentioning earlier, to have some challenges that are more like wayfinding, et cetera, and challenges to executive function that otherwise would be impossible to do in other than in a laboratory setting. We can do it in primary care now.
Yeah, like for instance, how we assess Alzheimer's disease, that could be hugely improved, with VR. And the challenge is that we need a lot of normalized data, and we need, standards. And so we just need data. And I think that's been a bottleneck, is just to run these large sample studies. But it's definitely doable.
So to members of our, one moment, I just want to make sure that we unpack this a little bit for members of our audience who may not be familiar with what exactly neuropsychological assessments are, what their role is in rehabilitation, and how VR might be used to be able to standardize or increase accessibility to some of these assessments, or increase the precision with which measurements are made, or the ecological validity. I think as you were saying, Walter. Can you talk a little bit about just what the role is of neuropsychological assessments and neuro rehab, and what you envision as how VR may assist with that? Perhaps you first, Nantia, given your focus.
Yeah, I mean, I know more so in the context of memory. The way we assess memory in neuropsychological field is using very simple tasks that are far from what memory usage is in the real world. They're like, learn a list of words. Here's 7 words. Now, okay, I'm going to distract you. Now I'm coming back. What were those words, right? When do we ever really do that in real life? So, or, just things, recreate, here's a drawing, okay, now I'm going to take it away. Now draw it from memory. I mean, some of it, sure, but how do you simulate an Alzheimer's patient who has just walked out into their neighborhood and completely got lost, and a family member or somebody found them, right? Or whatever it may be, these real memory disruptions that they have, or they're in an event with their family member and now they're all of a sudden forgetting some very important memory of their grandson or grandchild or whatever it is, right? So the question is, if we're going to assess these impairments properly such that we can see if a treatment's actually improving them, we need tests that have ecological validity, like Walter was mentioning, and VR is really a way to do that. I mean, I'm surprised, honestly, it hasn't been incorporated sooner, but then I realize it's because we need a lot of data to say, okay, this is when we do neuropsych assessments, we're always comparing to sort of a normalized standard score to see how much above or below this person is to try to help inform a diagnosis. And we just don't have that data when it comes to VR. So that's the hesitation to use it.
What's encouraging to me is seeing that some of the technology companies that are making the enabling technology we're using for clinical care and research are trying to help address that problem. I was impressed that Hewlett Packard, which makes a head-mounted display called the OmniSet that has some biosensors built into it, is making they've used a lot of that data they've collected in some very large-scale studies, and they've made it publicly available for derivative analysis. And they use that data to come up with an index of cognitive load, just one measurement, but the data they're collecting with a variety of challenges can be used to look at other aspects and see how it correlates with standard measurements. And they're encouraging people to contribute to that data set. And also, we need a library of culturally diverse, age-appropriate, unbiased challenges, and not just human in the environment, but human to human and multi-user dynamics to assess some other aspects of cognitive function that we're not easily able to obtain otherwise. So, you're absolutely right. The data is going to be key, and I think we have to all work together to both come up with the new standards for how to score this new data that we're getting, and also share it with each other in a way that makes sense.
Do we know if anybody is working on developing a full psychological battery through VR?
I do not know anybody.
That would be great, though. If somebody's doing that.
Opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah, there's groups that are doing parts of it, and some creative approaches. I'm impressed by what Altoida is doing with AR, where they do a version of that standard memory test that Nancy described, but they place objects in the room that you have to remember where to find, but they combine it with measuring the trajectory and speed and smoothness of the movement. So the concept of integrating another signal with a standard challenge, I think, is a way to sort of dramatically evolve it. And there are other groups like Virtual Leap is doing some neuropsychological assessments, but nobody who's really doing it in a solid, comprehensive way, to my knowledge.
One thing you mentioned there that reminded me is that the data that comes out, the behavioral data that comes out of these tasks is also so much more complex, right? In the neuropsych assessments we have now, it's like, okay, they either remembered it or they didn't. It's either yes or no. Whereas what we have there is their trajectory, their speed to the target, their excess path length, or whatever it may be, right? So which is such a much more rich data set that can give you so much more insight into their deficits, right? But the challenge there is also how to analyze it, how to create protocols where it makes it easy for researchers and new users to be able to do that and assess. But once it's done, then hopefully we have a new era of neuropsych assessment.
Well, and we're getting better at using machine learning to also filter and auto tag some of the data and take what would otherwise be an impossible, laborious task to help us get our grip on all this very rich data. Still a lot.
Certainly it's what feels sometimes like an impossible and always laborious task to just do a manual neuropsychological assessment. The full battery takes so much time, and finding in a lot of areas qualified people who are available and accessible to be able to deliver the testing is challenging. So it could certainly facilitate scaling and dissemination of these services in areas where they're hard to access.
I'll tell you one use case I found particularly exciting, at least on the top level. which was during awake neurosurgery, when there does need to be neuropsychological testing which is the purpose of having the patient awake, to use a VR environment to generate some standard challenges. And then also, you can also have the patient's friend or brother or mother in the waiting room and able to connect to them and help calm them down and be with them during this very scary procedure. So I think sometimes there's additional benefits to not just doing better assessments, but providing better connection and care.
In the space of neuro rehab, which conditions has VR or VR platforms best been established for? You know, where is the therapeutic effectiveness of VR best been established?
From my perspective, it would be stroke, traumatic brain injuries, pain. Pain is really big. There's lots of studies that shows that VR decreases pain by more than 15 to 20%, and there is retention after. And we have also used it with Parkinson's, MS patients. And anything that's related to changing that neuroplasticity of your brain, I think VR is a good candidate. And also in areas where you will need repetitive tasks and repetitive movements that need to be done, VR would be effective there too, so that you are keeping that patient motivated, engaged in their therapy plan.
That sounds like all neurological and psychiatric disorders.
Everything.
Well, and they often occur in the same patient. I'd imagine, you know, in the rehab setting, you have the, you know, the explicit, you know, physical rehabilitative goal, the neurologic rehabilitation, the brain rehabilitation has to happen. You have the anxiety disorder or the post-traumatic stress that the patient's recovering from what perhaps caused the injury and the pain, you know, disorder that's there. Have we gotten into actually multiple indications, you know, of VR, or we're still at a place where we're thinking about one application, one indication at a time?
We have definitely, I really like your point where you're talking about you need the psychological, the physical, and the cognitive part, and that's something VR can do that normal physical therapy can't, because right now with traditional physical therapy, it's very isolated. You're either working on your functional goals or you're working on your cognitive goals, but not both together. And that's the beauty of VR, it can provide that. With at least coming to your second question, with at least what we do, anything that we build can be used for different indications. It's not one app for one person. It's most about their functional level and what their goals are, and what data points that they might want to collect with this particular patient.
Natia, were you going to say something on that?
No, I mean, we haven't really explored that too much, so I don't have a lot of experience, but I would imagine that, you know, something that works for pain could work for anxiety, for depression, you know, so there's a lot of potential overlap I could see would be useful there.
What's been the biggest barrier or challenge or difficulty that each of you have encountered and had to navigate in this space? It's, you know, nothing is all peaches and cream. There's always challenges. What are, and I guess, you know, there are a lot of, there are challenges that relate to any new innovation, but I guess I'm thinking really about the applied challenges in terms of translating this into patient care, into services for patients. You know, what challenges you've encountered?
Pick one. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I think Veena's probably going to agree with this, I hope, but I think the gating step has been, it's the chicken or egg problem, that to raise the financing to move what might have been underwritten by early grant money as clinical studies out into a commercial product, you do need, it does take underwriting and investment. And often the investors want to see that other people have successfully done something similar before they'll put money in. And it becomes a challenge. Just, I think the missing trace ingredient to translation from academic into early stage clinical care to broader acceptance is time and money. And we'll get there. There's some amazing work by groups like Veena that are showing the way, but it will take time to have the medical, legal, economic system adjust to incorporate anything that's new. It's a conservative ecosystem, as we all know, and as it perhaps should be. But I think the biggest challenge is not technology. The technology is getting better very rapidly and coming down in cost, but it's not the barrier. It's not the science. There's a lot of work to be done in the underpinnings of science, but we have enough to help inform where to go and at least get started. It's not the creativity of wonderful entrepreneurs like Veena and her group. And they're leveraging what our friends in the entertainment and computer gaming arena have shown as ways of bringing adherence and making something interesting. And it's not the analytics part. We can look to other fields to see that. It's that translation out into taking something that works and has value and just getting it into the medical ecosystem is a challenge. But it's changing. Finally, some of the larger healthcare groups are paying attention, and they, I think, will team with the early stage groups to help migrate things out. So I'm optimistic that we're at a turning point this year. Veena, what's been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with Dr. Greenleaf, and I come from a developer background in academia where I'm like, product is everything, and building a good product will, bring the money, and that's the mindset that I came with when starting this company. And then I realized it's not. We have the technical capabilities. We have the data analytics. It's not the technology. It's not the science. All of that is there, but we have so many other barriers. Like one for healthcare, we know is hard, and it's slower than any other industry that might take on something new. So there's that, and then there's the regulatory processes that we had to go through even to get to market. Even though we had the technology. So that's a big barrier for a lot of companies that do not have the funding. Even they kind of die even by getting to just market. And once you do get to market, it's about showing them who pays for this, right? That's a big question in healthcare. Like, is the patient paying for it? Is there insurance, or is there reimbursement? Do we have CPT codes? So all of that is something that we had to navigate and even do. And we do have answers for that. And then it's the next stage of how we always love physical therapists that are champions and are really interested in VR. We go to the earlier adopters first, and then it kind of seeps into the others. And I'm glad there are bigger groups coming into the space that have much more resources and are educating the space that that smaller startups like us can like piggyback on. I think it's good for the industry. And when larger groups do come in, that that we're doing something good. We know that there is a market for this, and this is the way forward. And I love that's happening now, and there's more so in the last couple of years than it was maybe in 2017, 2018, when we were just starting off. So I have a very optimistic view for the future.
Let me reflect the question back to you, Itay. You're part of a healthcare ecosystem, and you are part of an innovative center that adopts. You're an early adopter. What have you seen as barriers among your institution and your colleagues and your ecosystem?
Well, I think that certainly what you have been describing, I think that there are not many areas where VR has become established as a standard of care. In terms of demonstrating that it provides improvements over other available interventions. There's areas where it's really promising, but I think more work has to be done to basically generate the evidence, A, and then B, generate the evidence of cost effectiveness, and then, C, get over all the other hurdles around adoption and diffusion of innovation that influence things. But I think that there's so much promise and there's so many signals of efficacy, but there really needs to be, more research and more comparative effectiveness research, demonstrating effectiveness in the real world for clinical indications and building a foundation that alters the standards of care that says, hey, for you to safely manage, post-traumatic stress disorder, or acute post-operative pain, VR should really be a part of the toolkit because the evidence shows A, B, or C. And I think the evidence is compelling, but I don't think it makes it makes a slam dunk case.
And to add to that, so where does this evidence likely to come from? And then if you ask that question, academia, if for instance is one example, what's the bottleneck there? And my thoughts on that are that in the education system, we're lacking education in this area, partly because it's very new. But right, if a new clinical lab or research program wants to start doing this, there's a high, there's a struggle there for them to do that, partly because like new students drive this innovation, right? And the students are not equipped necessarily with both the clinical research and the software, hardware development, or just comfort that, for instance, someone like, Veena had with your education, right? The programs at UCLA or other places, they're far behind where it should be right now to get these folks who are going to be driving innovation in the future to be able to do that. And I think so that's one area also I think that's lacking, at least in what I see, in the academic field, is the education. So my lab is privileged to have funding to hire a full-time game developer and 3D modeler. Not all labs can do this, right? Especially if you just want to start in VR. You're not going to have funding for that. And you unfortunately need a lot of funding because those folks are not going to want to work at an academic salary. So, that's a major challenge for getting the evidence, as you say, to, progress the whole field forward.
Such a good point, because in my lab, I was the 3D developer, the 3D artist, the lighting person, everything. So I understand the challenges, but what makes me again optimistic about this is we have more and more universities that are contacting us that want to add this as part of their curriculum for their physical therapists and OTs. So this is good that now that they want to show this and make this a part of something that they have to learn as part of their course. And that shift makes me optimistic that now that when these PTs and OTs do come into become clinicians that are treating patients, they already know about this and they can help spread the word.
I think as the larger medical device and pharma companies and the healthcare networks start looking to move into this arena and underwrite and invest, and they have the experience at how to fund large phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials, demonstrate efficacy, and they have the channels to go out to support and improve. So I think that, we will see, in the next few years, I think some dramatic shifts here. It is going to take time, but I think we're at a point of inflection where it's going to pick up speed pretty fast.
I want to talk about risks. And risks at large, I think there's risks in any new field when it's exciting and it's easy to be bullish. Getting out, over one's skis in terms of, promise. What are the risks in terms of that? I also want to talk about the very concrete and specific risks for patients using VR. We all, probably personally experience for ourselves and our kids and others the downsides of other devices that have overtaken our life that alter our focus, that alter the way we structure the world around us, alter our sense of self. Are there risks for VR? Either, about compulsive use of VR, about, how we move between the VR space and the non-VR space. So perhaps maybe we can start with that, talking about the concrete challenges and risks of VR and its application for patients. And then maybe separately after that, we can get, bigger and broader and talk about the field and, what are the risks as the field is developing.
Let me jump in because it is an area that I've been very concerned about. I'm so glad you brought it up. I do want to start by saying that, in my opinion, a good defense is an offense, that we need to identify the risks and do something about it now, early, before the standards get set, before the biases get baked into our data sets, and before there's an adverse experience. There was a lot of concern about simulator sickness previously with the previous generations of the technology. I think that's less of a concern now, although we do need to pay attention to people who might have epilepsy or other challenges to using the VR technology. But I think as we see it move deeper into the consumer arena as part of work and play and entertainment, that a lot of that will come out, and there'll be evolutions of technology to address that. But I do think patient privacy and protection, as there's a lot of information that people are broadcasting in the public domain right now about their health status just by playing some multi-user online games. You can interpret the behavior and decision-making speed and reactions. And that becomes even more so in a clinical context where we're tagging it with diagnostic information. And so we have to secure the data. We have to make sure, again, it's unbiased and correctly interpreted. And we have to make sure that it's safe. I do worry, and Nancy, perhaps you have some colleagues who are working on this problem, but I do worry about the developing brain and the visual ocular system for children in particular, who might spend a lot of time in a simulated environment where we are not having the natural evolution of our visual system because of spending so much time there. I'm not overly worried about that, but I think it needs to be addressed. So, and that's just a few of the top levels. There's many issues that I think, hopefully we can elaborate on them a little bit further here. But I do think they're addressable problems. It'll be easier to address them if we start on it now. And there are some associations that are trying to come up with safety initiatives for this emerging technology.
Anthea, do you want to speak to this at all?
I mean, that was great. I would totally agree. I don't know that I have that much to add, but I really strongly believe that the earlier you start to think about these risks and ethical considerations, the sooner you can come up with solutions and prevent things. So I'm 100% with you on that, Walter.
Dina?
Yeah, I mean, those were some really good points. And I think one of the biggest ones, as Nadia said previously, is education. And as you know, if you have more resources and also it's building these treatment plans and also educating and putting more effort into that would probably help get it to that next stage. And also access to care. We know there is still a hardware component that is required for VR headsets, and that's one of the things. Even though it has evolved to a point where it's wireless, it's portable. We do not have to have a laptop anymore, or base stations outside. It's much better, but still there's a hardware component to it. And the hardware has not evolved to the point as mobile phones where we can move from one, create an iOS or Android version, then it works on all headsets. There's still a little bit of barrier there to make sure that the experience is good. So as the hardware gets better, I'm excited about software engineer that we can do more. So there's that part, the evolution of the hardware, and then figuring out how it fits into healthcare. The healthcare about ROI and reimbursement, and also security and HIPAA compliance.
So none of you have expressed much concern about compulsive use or addiction, loss of control, overuse. Is that not much of a concern?
Real world is much more fun. I mean, as well as we make the amazing virtual worlds and science fiction environments, I do think that my experience has been that you still want to take that headset off and get back to interacting with people in the real world. I'm sure there will be people who, for whatever reason, may have a challenge with that, but I haven't observed it very much. Have you guys?
I mean, there might. Go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry.
I mean, there might be a few outliers, but I used to game a lot for hours, and I was scared that I might be that compulsive user when VR came about, developing for it. But I think the most I've used is probably like 1 hour or 1 hour, 40 minutes continuous use, because you're also working your body. It's not just sitting down and working. So you do get tired and you do want to get out of the headset, especially if I try to do physical activity when I use VR than sitting down experiences. So I don't think that's much of a concern.
I think about that, but I think we're just maybe further away from it than we are with phones, for instance, like is more concerning to me right now in terms of my children. So, I think it will become an issue if, that level of reinforcement is present in the VR headset, space, like it is in social media or whatever. So if somehow that is integrated, then I do think we need to worry about it. Kids wanting to be interacting with their friends in the headset, versus. So I think it's something to think about, but I think it's far, far away, as of right now. But
Yeah, my oldest daughter, 3 kids, and she just turned 16, and she's wonderful. But I'm surprised how little she interacts with her friends by phone. They text, they'll send voice messages to each other, and they'll see each other at school and in places. But really, the medium for personal interaction, interpersonal interaction, has evolved. Now, I could put a value judgment on it, the values I grew up with, but I don't know that it's better or worse. She's got good and deep friendships. But my own personal work, my subspecialty is addiction psychiatry. And so I tend to see the world through how can any behavior or substance become a mode of escape, become a mode that is so consuming that it takes us out of the kind of connections that we need to have elsewhere in reality. And I certainly have the personal experience that I think each of you have described, where when I have engaged with VR, I enjoy it, and then I enjoy returning back to my reality. But I do wonder, in a future state where these headsets are broadly accessible because they're even cheaper, and the experience is even richer and more fluid, and where there's opportunities to do more, whether it's therapeutics, it's your therapy session, it's your interaction with people who you are communicating with, as more and more can happen in this space, what are the potential risks that we may deal with, and how do we get ahead of understanding what those are and creating a system that can help protect, against some of those.
It's a very valid concern, and just as there's some people that going to a casino is a risky thing to do because of their predilections. I think there probably will be people and just as we're trying to make these environments more engaging to promote adherence and make the arduous process, often depressing process of recovering from an injury less challenging, I think there will be a point where you're absolutely right. There'll be a point where there'll be a tremendous attraction to spend some time with your virtual friends and doing the things that you can do there that you can't do other places, and meet new people there that you have trouble meeting in real life. And I think I just don't think that the technology is the issue. I think it's more a cultural and an issue that is going to be part of education too. And we need to make sure that people who are at risk for getting trapped in an engaging virtual environment, the Lotus Eaters, that there's a pathway for them to have support and help. And one of the things I do see in the younger generations is a much more comfortable level of talking about stigma and challenges, and what people might not have previously said, oh, I'm having a trouble with an addiction. People call each other out on it and support each other and help each other. So maybe by the time that the technology becomes even more compelling, we'll get better at helping each other and not be caught up in traps like that.
Love that you bring the question up right now, because this is the time to think about it and maybe add those controls in from what we have learned from phone addiction, which all of us are addicted to phones. I'll speak for myself. So, and then you have, people using it all the time and looking down. So what I've done with mine is I've started using the digital well-being applications on my phone where I don't get any notifications between 9 to 5 anymore. So sometimes I forget where my phone is, which is great because that's where I wanted to get to and not have my phone around. So now it's a good thing to think about that and maybe add those controls into VR from everything that we have learned and what could go wrong, especially as Facebook and social media became so big. We know what the cons are and we can like squash it right away and add the controls in. Think about it. Maybe we should definitely talk to the XR Safety Initiative about this too.
I'd love to ask each of you a personal question. You guys each developed VR, study VR, looking at its applications. How do you use it in your own life? Do you engage with VR, and for what purpose? And if not, why not?
Yeah, I was dreading this question actually, because now you're outing me. I don't use it very much, and I think, but I also don't golf. And even though I have friends and colleagues who do, it's for me, it's a lack of time. I probably would use VR a lot more if I had time to do it. And I find it more rewarding to do things like this, to talk about science, to talk about evolution of clinical things. And right now, the virtual environments are sort of lonely and boring, and I haven't found a compelling. I love checking out great new VR applications and learning about them, but then I'll put them down. So I haven't used a VR system for weeks, to be honest with you. There, I said it.
You're not alone. You're not alone. I don't have Instagram or Facebook or any of that stuff. Like I'm just anti-device in personal life. So I'm the same. I use it in lab all the time. We're testing out experiments, we're developing new things. But then when I go home, it's like, I don't want to have anything to do with any kind of devices. That my family, and hiking and working out and martial arts and things like that are what I do for fun.
And Veena, I thought you said an hour, 40 minutes a day.
I mean, I use it at least every day. One, either testing the applications that we have built. I've also used our own applications to work out. And then I do use a normal consumer headset for checking out different games. What I like to do there is learning about new interaction techniques. Maybe somebody came out with something that we hadn't thought about, and user experience. I do that for, work-wise, for research. And then also I really like playing VR.
Yeah, you said that you're like a Beat Saber ninja, or you're on the way.
Yes.
Right. All right.
Where do each of you see VR in the neuro rehab space or beyond in the next 5 years, 10 years? What's your vision for what it might look like, and how do you see it getting there?
Go ahead, please, Veena.
So the ideal vision for me, obviously, we want this to be the standard of care, because we know that clearly there are benefits and better outcomes of using virtual reality for therapeutic and also for rehabilitation. So it becoming the standard of care is what we are looking at. Again, not because it's a new flashy thing, it's because there is real gains that you can have with virtual reality.
Walter?
For me, it's a little bit like the Aesop's fable of the boy with a bird in his hand asking the wise man if it's alive or dead, and he responds, "Well, it's up to you." I think it's up to the people who are listening to this broadcast and their colleagues and friends. I think the pathway is there and the energy is there. There's so many hardworking people like Nanthia and Veena and you, Itai, and others that are working hard to optimize and to perfect and to make a difference using this technology. And the other thing that's making a big difference is the consumer electronics companies and large groups like Walmart and Amazon and everybody are jumping into healthcare, leveraging technology. So it depends on how deep they go and how well they go. And I think the pandemic has taught us that we can use technology to provide healthcare, and we've responded to a crisis by developing new telemedicine systems. So we can go there, and I think we need to. With an aging population, I don't think we're going to have any choice. So what I can't tell in the next 5 years how soon, but the things that that Nanthia and Vina and colleagues are doing become part of the standard of care? Absolutely. How soon is hard to say.
And Walter, has the pandemic, the last 2 years, has it altered your trajectory, or in your view, has it altered the trajectory of the field?
I think it has accelerated what was already in process. There were a lot of breakthroughs. One of the companies I helped get started, the Pear Therapeutics, was able to pioneer getting FDA clearance for software as a medical device. Things are changing. Regulatory barriers were already dropping. So with what the pandemic has done, I think, is accelerated and also brought in a lot of investment funds into this arena. So what was already in motion with a revolution in digital health is now just picking up speed.
Nanthia?
Let's see. So back to the original question, which was
Your vision of the future.
Yeah, right.
Where is this going?
So for mine, it's an academic bias, of course. I'd like to see better educational systems for the upcoming generation to be trained in this space, and I'd like to see more research labs using these technologies as if they're just any other device that most labs have, right? And so those two things, and maybe even also university supported centers or institutions that are multidisciplinary, that allow us to not have to reinvent the wheel and really just work across departmental boundaries to facilitate these kinds of studies, because it does require interdisciplinary relationships. So those are three things I'd like to see.
And Nanthia, you mentioned that in the course of your work on this, you moved from 2D presentations of information to the rich environment of VR. What other technological innovations do you expect or hope for within the actual delivery systems for immersive therapeutics that might influence your work?
Oh, I mean, I love the integration of multisensory feedback. I'm hoping we can start to integrate some of those technologies to the point where, it's really truly naturalistic, sensory, auditory, and then also user in interaction, with feedback, lots of software related changes to that. I hope I could see being very beneficial.
Deepak, we have to ask you the same question.
What technological interventions
or your vision of the future?
The vision. I think that it's funny. I was thinking about my next question, so now I have to think about the last question that I asked in order to answer it to you. I think that I also have a academic orientation to really want to see the evidence generated across all the areas where there are potential indications. I think that that for any device, or technology intervention that has a place as a consumer product, there's this sort of muddy zone between, what is a consumer device that anybody could use for anything that they find useful versus what do we use as a clinical therapeutic, intervention. And I think it's important that we sort of keep a line between those things so that we can define and develop the evidence adequately for its role as a modality that can facilitate clinical therapeutics, while allowing the consumer space to evolve and develop as it is, and no doubt influence that area. And certainly that's happened for the actual hardware and technology, and I'm sure the content as well. I think I'm also really interested in our ability to offer more, I think you used the term earlier, therapeutic protocols within the actual device. So right now, I think a lot of the power of virtual reality is, as Vina showed in her applications, as therapists, using it to help guide patients through activities. I think that I'm really excited by what can happen when an individual can put on the device and have a full therapy, delivered within that context, and particularly what that might allow outside of the clinic, and then how that might leverage what clinicians do when they're with patients. So I see that, and then I see the importance of managing this risk of our inclination to escape into devices, which I think we do have to be thinking about and protect against, because it's something that we're at risk of with all of our consumer devices and technologies, and particularly how they form and modulate and change the way we pay attention and our capacity for deep focus, which we need both to creatively think and do scholarly work, but also to achieve well-being and intimacy and all the other important things in life. So I think that, like anything else, is about cultivating reflective function, even as we adopt and embrace technologies like this.
Those are great design criteria that we need to put. We should put out a manifesto with those as part of it.
That we'll add that to our to-do list.
Yeah.
So along those lines, who is creating the manifestos, and can you talk about the field as a whole, the organizations within the field, be it academic or non-academic organizations that are working explicitly to think about these problems, to address these problems, to move things forward in a concerted way, all along, while at the same time there's a lot of distributed, decentralized, development, by companies and by academics and by individuals. So what's happening at the organizational level?
Well, there are a number of organizations that are trying to help move things forward in a robust manner and pay attention to some of the safety issues, and also help overcome some of the barriers. One organization is the ISVR, International Society of Virtual Rehabilitation. It's more of an academic-oriented organization of people who have been doing research in the field for a long time, and plus new people with an academic focus trying to evolve standards and share information and help move that part of the field forward. There's IVRA, the International Virtual Reality Health Association, which brings together people from research and science and clinical care, but also people who are part of the medical product ecosystem and the healthcare ecosystem, and to try and have common dialogue. And we hold an annual conference in the US. It's going on next week in Nashville. And then we also have a European conference every year. There's also, the virtual reality safety initiatives. There's several of those that are doing great work. And I think some of the manufacturers of the technology are also trying to both internally come up with policies that regulate and pay attention to some of these issues and enforce good standards, and are talking to experts, philosophers, and safety experts on how best to design for addressing some of these concerns. So I think it's evolving hand in hand as the technology evolves, but there are a few good organizations out there working on these issues, and including the members of this conference too.
Right. And on the software side of things, I'm excited about OpenXR and what they're doing. So they're creating an open standard that provides like high performance access to VR and AR modules, and so that it can be ported from one hardware to the other much easier than it's possible right now, especially from a VR application to an AR application. So I'm glad these organizations are working on it and working together, where there's Magic Leap, Microsoft, Oculus, everybody working together to create that open standard.
Yeah, there's the XRA organization, which is trying to work with, as a representative, to deal with regulatory concerns, both not just in medicine, but the broader industry organization.
Mm-hmm. Anything that I haven't asked you that you want to make sure that we cover, or any questions that you'd like to ask each other?
Well, there's so many questions to ask my colleagues on this panel, and but I think it's something that's worthy of a longer conversation. I guess just off the top of my head, how do you, Nancy and Vina and Itai, how do you connect with other people in the field? What's the best way to do that, and what's a better way to do that?
I think for us,
Vina,
it's just
start?
yeah, just having that open dialogue between companies and being part of these organizations so that we're all sharing that knowledge, collective knowledge that we have, so we can move the industry forward much faster and better instead of trying to reinvent the wheel and learn from it, especially when it comes to regulatory information, because now there are enough VR devices that have gotten to the point of software as a medical device or FDA clearance that we can learn from others. So another company that's coming into this space has a much faster and better pathway to get there. And everything that we have learned, from adherence to motivation to how to engage patients, and also the concept using VR, we love sharing that through mediums like this, and also getting in touch with other entrepreneurs.
Right. Nantia?
I think in this space, it's been a unique experience in that there are a lot more in collaborations between industry and academia, which I don't necessarily see in other areas of my research. So I've been privileged to work with some great, industry experts, and that's really helped us move forward much more quickly.
How has that been for you as an academic at a time where where there's much more skepticism around academic interaction with industry because of misdeeds of the past, but those interactions are necessary. They can be valuable, they can be managed appropriately. But how have you learned to manage those interactions in a way that can sort of hold the line and protect yourself, but also have the type of partnerships that are valuable?
It's definitely challenging, especially because as academics, we're not trained or are in no way experts on these kinds of interactions. I don't, coming into this, didn't even know that there were bottlenecks or challenges that I should be aware of or thinking about. The university has been helpful, though. UCLA is very a strong supporter of industry academic relationships, and so they've evolved perhaps over the last 20 years and are much more supportive. And we have a center that has people equipped with helping us negotiate certain agreements with industry, and making it not so painful to do it formally speaking. So I think folks are evolving, and I hope that becomes more prevalent across universities.
One more question for Nancy. What about FNIRS? Is that something that your group is looking at? Is it relevant to your area of inquiry?
It's not something we use, but it's definitely relevant. We're writing a few, papers now, sort of looking at the future of mobile brain imaging and all these different technologies. There's also MEG, Open MEG, that has come out, and so it's going to become, I think, a much larger community and area of research. And so FNIRS is definitely one of those techniques that has the potential to integrate with VR, AR to answer some very important questions about in neuroscience. So yeah.
Okay.
Coming from the industry perspective, going from academia to industry, and now also working with universities, we do work with a lot of universities, especially local university here in Texas, the University of Texas universities. We have actually won NSF grants along with the university to work together on projects. So we love doing that. We love, there are researchers that use the system to do clinical studies and trials and share that information with us that we can use to get to that efficacy information that the clinicians are looking for. So we do work with a lot of universities around us.
And funding, there's a lot more funding opportunities for industry academic collaborations, which
That's true.
Let me close with a final question around how you would advise somebody that reaches out to you that says, hey, the work you're doing in VR is fascinating. How do I get involved? Where do I get started? what's your advice to, the young people or to colleagues that reach out with inquiries like that?
I
Happens.
I have a standard answer. I ask them what they're passionate about, what questions do they have, and then once I hear the answer, I refer them to Veena or Nanthia or other people, either in academia, if that's what they're ready for or interested in, or in early stage companies that need their help and their energy. And there's so many opportunities. The learning curve can be there, but I think if you follow your passion, what you're really curious about, again, either in a more of an academic pursuit or as a let's build something and get it out there pursuit, there's so many groups that to approach and to who need people to help them move forward.
If they're fortunate enough to ask that question to you, then they've reached somebody that has, the ability to touch pretty much every part of the field.
So the field's not that big yet, but no, I think there is a need for. Are you hiring, Veena, for example?
We're always hiring, yes.
Oh,
No, so
We are.
What
But
do you
yeah,
tell people?
so I do get that very frequently, at least one email a day. So I start with, what they're passionate about, and please send us their resume. So we've had many people that have become part of the company or intern that has helped us out from business to regulatory to on the science side of things, and especially biomedical and neuroscience majors. So I'm definitely open to it. I ask them, show me the resume, and then if they're not a good fit for us, I do point them to somebody else. But I do take it seriously because I was that person maybe a few years ago, trying to get in touch with the industry leaders and learning from them. So I am glad that there are more and more students who are reaching out and young people who are trying to start their own companies. I'm always all for it and helping them as much as I can.
Great. And Nanthia?
I guess for me, the question usually comes from students that are in the beginning of their training. So, usually it's try to get a interdisciplinary education, even though your major may not require it. That's kind of, my answer, which is not maybe what they want to hear. But I am also the director of a training program at UCLA, which is translational neurotechnology, which this space is included within that. And what our goal is to train students, no matter what their departmental major or specialty is, a little bit of everything. They get the clinical, they shadow a clinician, they learn the clinical needs if they're an engineer. They don't just learn, are focused on the hardware, but what is the clinical question that needs to be solved, that kind of thing. Or neuroscientists or clinician scientists getting training on more of the software development or hardware, development. So that kind of interdisciplinary education, I think at that stage is very useful. That way, once they get to, a later stage, they can easily adapt to wherever their passion may be.
I love that because I think I did that without knowing I was doing it. I come from a computer science background, went to an art school to do game design development, and worked at the neuroscience lab to learn about the brain. And I think all that culminated into what we're doing right now, and also took courses with the entrepreneurship thing. And I love that's what I love about universities and students who are interested in what they can go and learn a little bit of everything that university provides, so that the interdisciplinary knowledge is really important.
So listen to or find your passion, build a broad and diverse foundation, and then perhaps I would just add to it, find incredible mentors like the three of you or others that can help you along the way. Well, Walter, Veena, Nanthia, thank you so much for joining us for this panel discussion. It's been really interesting. We could go on and on, but we've had a good 2 hours. And to those of you in the audience that have made it to this point, thank you for joining us. And I wish you all good health and wellness, and look forward to see what the future beholds.
thank you for the great questions and dialogue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Well, thank you so much, Itai and Walter and Veena and Nanthia for that exceptional discussion and deep dive around the emerging and evolving use of virtual reality and other extended reality technologies in neuroscience and in neurorehabilitation. I think there's a lot for us to think about, covered a lot of material, and this is why it's great that all of this is on demand for those of you that might want to go back and listen to it again. What a great discussion. Thank you all for being with us for this deep dive. So we have one more session left for Virtual Medicine 22. Before that time, we're going to take a quick break. We'll all be back on the main stage at 1:10 p.m. Pacific time. So take a look at the agenda. You'll see what's coming up there in our last session entitled Through the Looking Glass. This is a chance for us to really bring it all together and to think about the future of medical extended reality. I can't wait for this conversation that I'll be having with Adam Gazzaley, and for Walter Greenleaf will be on the stage. Then I'll be wrapping it all up at the end. So looking forward to that. Take a quick break, check out the exhibit hall if you haven't already, and we'll be back soon enough on the main stage. Thank you all for joining us for this deep dive session.
you.